Bold Predictions, Chapter 16, the things that you claim you would bet your own money on when it comes to college football 2022. Let's start in Tuscaloosa, shall we? Chris said Alabama will lose 2 games in the regular season, and then here's the cherry on top. Neither will be against Texas A&M. I'm not even reading the last part because we have jerks in the control room that added that. How's this going to happen? So 2.5, well, two losses, neither are to Texas A&M. Removing A&M changed a lot there. So I'm going to call this an 8.5. And I would make it even more bold than that on the 1 to 10 boldness scale. But then you look at Alabama's road schedule and you realize, whew, they play at Texas, they play at Arkansas, at Tennessee, at LSU, and at Ole Miss. Luckily, they don't have to play themselves. That's the only team that can say that in the SEC West. That is a stretch, by the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams, all of whom have a regular season over-under win total of 7 or more. That is a tough road schedule. That's really tough. And they get A&M at home, but Chris said they're not going to lose to A&M, so I've got to assume they're losing 2 games to Texas, Arkansas, Tennessee, LSU, or Ole Miss. Alabama's going to be really good this year, but that is possible. I mean, if there's any road schedule, I guess, that's going to do that to an elite team, it would be the one they're playing. Even having said that, though, when you got the pass rush they're going to have, when you got the secondary they're going to have, their secondary going to be overshadowed by that linebacker room. That secondary is going to be as good as Saban's had in a few years. Oh, by the way, you got returning Heisman Trophy winner, and you have what they can do offensively. Jahmyr Gibbs just casually joins the team. They're going to be really good. So it's going to be hard to knock them off, especially twice, if A&M's not one of them. I gave that an 8.5. And now we're going to go even bolder than that because we're headed down to Tallahassee, Florida, where we have the following prediction. PJ said, Florida State is this year's Baylor. They're going to win the ACC from Gainesville, Georgia. Home of, I believe, the Gainesville Red Elephants. Deshaun Watson played there. Blake Sims played there. They came and just drug Harris County in the playoffs one year. Anyway, back to college football. This is a 9. Florida State's not winning the ACC this year. I am not trying to disparage the good name of the Florida State Seminoles. I believe they're 1 year away from being able to make these kinds of bold proclamations and put money on them. If I look at their schedule, which I'll go over in a second, I'll tell you why, but there's still too many holes here. Last year, to remind you where they were and how anemic they were through the air, last year they did not have a single game where they threw for 300 or more yards, and they were below 200 yards passing in 7 games. And I think they were a 5-win team last year. So we're asking them to make a pretty monumental leap here. They do have LSU in the out-of-conference. They go to NC State. They have to play Clemson, obviously. They go to Miami. They've got Florida at the end of the year. So they're drawing LSU and Florida in non-conference play on top of having to play Clemson, having to go to NC State. They go Wake, NC State, and Clemson back-to-back-to-back, mind you. So if you're trying to find 9 wins here, by default, they're going to be several upsets. They've got 4 consecutive losing season. They return a lot from last year, but that comes back to that age-old, is it good to return a huge chunk of a 5-win team thing? I'm somewhere in the middle on that because I do think what they're doing down there is working. It's just not an immediate Nick Saban year 1 to year 2 turnaround. They're on the right track. It's just that's why I believe in the 8-win number this year. Like I've said for the past few shows, if you go over to Knowles 24/7, you go to the message board there, the reasonable expectation, around Florida State is, can we win 8 games this year? Because you could sell me on 2023. You could sell me on get a nice 8-win season this year, go to a nice bowl game, lock down a recruiting class that's hopefully closer to the 8 to 12 range than it is the 18 to 22 range, and then let's do something in 2023. Maybe Duffy's another year long at quarterback. Let's do something in 2023. This year, though, no. This year, Florida State winning the ACC is a 9, maybe a tick or 2 higher than just a 9. Let's go to the Pac-12. I think we had a version of this one, but Simon Gibbs gave it to us like this. He cracked his knuckles, he cleared his throat, he said Utah is either going to be undefeated or 12-1, and they're going to crash the college football playoff. Now, Utah has not had a regular season with 2 or fewer losses since they've been in the Pac-12. It's been several years now. But they've been a very, very dependable program. Very steady program, one of the most veteran coaching staffs in America. 8th best odds to make the college football playoff right now. Actually, Jesse, was it to make the playoff or was it to win the title? They have the 8th best odds to do something. Either way, they have the 8th best odds to do something really good. To win the national championship. Okay, so to win the national championship, Utah has the 8th best odds, and there's like a 5-way tie at 8th. Let's talk about their schedule. They open at Florida. That's a road game. They open at they don't open at. They play UCLA on the road. They play Oregon on the road. And they've got USC at home. So their 4 toughest games, 3 of them are on the road. This is not an easy schedule. I keep going back to these Pac-12 schedules, especially this year, when you got Utah going to Gainesville to open the season, when you got Oregon going to Atlanta against Georgia to open the season. These are not easy schedules. You may not respect the Pac-12. These are not easy schedules. So to call them 12-1 or undefeated is lofty. I'm calling this an 8 on the boldness scale. If you would have just told me they're going to win the Pac-12, it would not be nearly as bold. They are a co-favorite right now to win the Pac-12 with USC, and Oregon's right behind them. But to go 12-1 or undefeated and make the playoff, that gets a little more bold. So I'm going to call that one an 8. Now let's get really close and near and dear to producer Jesse's heart. Penn State. I thought this was well put. Penn State returns to 10-plus win status. Sean Clifford is a big reason why. From State College, PA. You know what? That is reasonable. It's reasonable. I'm going to call it a 6 on the boldness scale. Only because I think there are going to be a lot of really, really close one-possession hinge type games. Classic Penn State. But this is very, very doable. Because I believe they were a 10-win team last year, masquerading as a 7-win team because their quarterback went down. If their quarterback does not go down at Iowa, I understand it's part of the game, but if he doesn't go down, I thought they were on their way to a 9 or 10-win season with Sean Clifford. So Sean Clifford is back. I roughly graduated the same year as I did from high school, but he is still playing college football. So he's back. The first 3 weeks of their schedule seem very familiar. If you're a Penn State fan, it should seem very familiar because you were kind of in this position last year, weren't you? Remember how the entire summer we talked about how important that game at Wisconsin was. And you guys went up there and got beat everywhere but the scoreboard. Box score told one story, scoreboard told another story. Who cares? You got it done. Then you came home, you had that big SEC out-of-conference matchup with Auburn, whiteout. We were there, and they won that one. And immediately you had 2 either-way games under your belt, and you were off to the races, but then the injury derails a lot of things. Well, this year, they open at Purdue. That's a Thursday night game. The line at last check was 3 in favor of Penn State. So very, very back and forth. Could go either way there. And then they go to Auburn. Penn State goes to Lee County, Alabama in week 3 this year. Those could go either way too. I'm going to overlook Ohio. Shame on me. If I come back to regret it, I will. But those are 2 games that we can look at, and you could easily sell me on either of them going either way. And think about the difference, obviously, in starting 3-0 versus starting 1-2, and you've still got games at Michigan against Ohio State, Michigan State. Yeah. Having said that, though, I do generally believe in this team. Their over-unders at 8.5. But if you could promise me health, if anyone out there is able to do that, I would love to hear that. If you could promise me health, and by the way, if you could promise me that their run game is even going to be decent this year, I would be able to buy this. They did not have an individual rush for 100 yards in a football game last year. Please fix it. Please, if nothing else, fix that. Keep my quarterback healthy. Get me someone to run it for 115 or 120 a Saturday this fall. If it's got to be Nick Singleton, true freshman, then it's got to be Nick Singleton. I'm big on him anyway. But if we can get some kind of decent run game up there, which falls partly on that stable of running backs and largely on that offensive line, if we can get that fixed, yeah, 10 wins is doable. Man, they had a string there from 16 to 19 where they 11, 11, 9, 11, and then we have a COVID 4-win season, and we got 7-6 last year. Are we bouncing back, or have we resettled into the 7 to 8 win range? I refuse to believe the latter is true. So I'm going to say this is a 6. I'm going to say it's doable. Last but not least, but this one is very bold, possibly the most bold prediction on tonight's show. Sean said a defensive player is going to make it to New York, Heisman Trophy finalist, not named Will Anderson. This is a 9.5 on the boldness scale. I do not believe this is going to happen. If it's not Will Anderson, but a defensive player does make it, it could very well be his teammate, Dallas Turner. But I wanted to go off the grid a little bit. I got chastised for this today, but at some point, about once or twice a month, producer Jesse starts mouthing off to me, and I point to the logo, and I say, whose name's on that logo? And he has to shut up. That's like my finishing move on him. Will McDonald at Iowa State is someone that if you told me a defensive player not named Will Anderson is going to make it to New York, not win it, make it to New York, I could buy. Jesse would tell you his stats aren't good enough. Well, I'm not predicting him to win it retroactively. I am saying that there is a world where Will McDonald blows up this year. Very good player for Iowa State. They probably have to shoulder a little bit of the load and have enough wins for him to matter. I get that. But Will McDonald, really, really good player for the Cyclones. Do I have bias there? Of course I do. I openly root for Iowa State. I think it's also fitting that his last name represents a restaurant with the same color scheme as the team he plays for. And that's the kind of stats and information not even producer Jesse could deliver. I realize that myself. Observational skills. But let's be real now. It's going to be tough, even for Will McDonald. So I think Will Anderson, because of the highway robbery that was committed against him last year, stands a chance of the sympathy vote. And then you're also going to watch him play, and you're going to realize this guy doesn't need my sympathy. He is a maniac, and he's going to play on a team with the best pass rush in America, so there's no way to double him unless you just want to take Dallas Turner, who looks like he grew up on Jupiter. He doesn't look like he really came from the same planet we do. If you want to turn him loose, be my guest. Point being, Will Anderson by 10 miles has got the best shot as a defensive player this year, but if it's not him, I don't think it'll be anybody. But if it is somebody, Will McDonald, Dallas Turner, we'll see. Some bold projections and predictions tonight, though. Very well done.